The Anglo-Zanzibar War. On August 25, 1896, the Sultan of Zanzibar died under circumstances that were, at the very least, convenient for his cousin, who moved into the palace within hours and declared himself the new ruler. There was one problem. Britain effectively controlled succession in Zanzibar under a prior treaty, and nobody had asked London for permission. The British sent an ultimatum: stand down by 9 a.m. on August 27th, or be fired on. The self-proclaimed Sultan gathered roughly 3,000 defenders inside the palace compound and refused to leave. At 9:02 a.m., 5 British warships anchored in the harbor opened fire. The wooden palace structure, undefended against naval artillery, began collapsing almost immediately, and the Sultan's flag was shot down within the first few minutes. The self-declared Sultan escaped out a back window partway through and took refuge at the German consulate. By 9:40 a.m., it was over. Officially, 38 minutes, the shortest war ever recorded.
The Football War. By 1969, El Salvador and Honduras had years of real tension behind them, land disputes, and a large population of Salvadoran migrants living and farming in Honduras amid rising resentment and land reform policies that specifically targeted them. That tension needed a spark, and the spark turned out to be a World Cup qualifying match. The two teams played a 3-game series to decide who advanced. The first match, in Tegucigalpa, ended in a Honduran win and a night of celebratory violence against Salvadorans living in the city. The second, in San Salvador, saw Salvadoran fans return to treatment. By the third and deciding match, played on neutral ground in Mexico City, mass expulsions of Salvadoran migrants from Honduras were already underway, and troops were massing at the border before the final whistle had even blown. El Salvador invaded Honduras on July 14th. The fighting lasted about 4 days and killed an estimated 2,000 people before the Organization of American States brokered a ceasefire. History remembers it by the match. The people who lived through it remember years of buildup that had almost nothing to do with soccer at all.
The War of the Stray Dog. In October 1925, at a tense stretch of the Greek-Bulgarian border near the town of Petrich, a Greek soldier's dog slipped its leash and bolted across the boundary line. The soldier chased after it without thinking. Bulgarian border guards, seeing an armed man cross into their territory without warning, opened fire and killed him. Greece treated the shooting as a deliberate provocation rather than a tragic accident, and within days, Greek troops crossed the border and occupied several Bulgarian towns. Bulgaria, on explicit instruction from the newly formed League of Nations, ordered its own forces not to resist and took the matter straight to Geneva instead. The League moved fast. It condemned Greece's response as wildly disproportionate, ordered an immediate withdrawal, and fined Greece reparations to be paid to Bulgaria. Greek troops were back across the border within about 10 days of the dog first crossing it. Historians still cite it as one of the League's few genuinely successful early interventions. A war stopped before it became a real one over a dog that was never seen again in any account of what happened next.
The Indo-Portuguese War. Portugal had held Goa, a small enclave on India's western coast, since the early 1500s, centuries after nearly every other European power still standing had begun handing back its South Asian colonies, and nearly 15 years after India itself had won independence and absorbed almost every other foreign-held territory on the subcontinent. Lisbon refused to negotiate, insisting Goa wasn't a colony at all, but an integral province of Portugal itself, non-negotiable by definition. In December 1961, India ran out of patience. Indian forces crossed into Goa on December 18th. Portugal's government had explicitly ordered its badly outnumbered garrison to fight to the last man rather than surrender, and order the troops on the ground had neither the numbers nor the will to actually carry out. The Portuguese governor signed a formal surrender less than 2 days later. 451 years of colonial rule ended in about 36 hours over the objections of a government that had insisted, right up until the tanks arrived, that it would never let go.
The Serbo-Bulgarian War. In 1885, Bulgaria, still technically a vassal state under the Ottoman Empire, unilaterally unified with the neighboring region of eastern Rumelia without asking anyone's permission, unsettling a Balkan balance the great powers had carefully negotiated. Serbia's King Milan saw an opening. Bulgaria's army was still reorganizing after the sudden unification, and his was not. He declared war, expecting a quick, easy land grab. It did not go that way. Bulgaria's army, despite having almost no time to prepare,
and most of its trained officers stationed elsewhere rushed whatever forces it had to the border and stopped the Serbian advance cold at the Battle of Slivnica within days. Serbian troops began retreating almost immediately, and Austria-Hungary stepped in diplomatically before Bulgaria could push the war back across the border in the other direction. Start to peace treaty, the whole thing took about 2 weeks, just long enough for a king to learn that probably an easy win and an easy win are not the same sentence.
The Emu War. In 1932, Western Australian farmers, many of them veterans recently resettled on marginal land after the First World War, were dealing with a genuine agricultural crisis. Roughly 20,000 emus, migrating inland after breeding season, were tearing through wheat farms and trampling fences. They petitioned the government for military assistance, and remarkably, they got it. Soldiers were dispatched with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. It did not go the way anyone expected. The emus turned out to be fast, evasive, and functionally impossible to corral. They scattered the moment gunfire started, split into small, unpredictable clusters, and kept moving. One officer later reported the birds seemed to post a lookout while the rest of a group fed. After about a week of operations and thousands of rounds fired, the military estimated it had killed a few hundred birds out of 20,000. And the campaign was quietly called off. Australia's brief official military operation against its own emu population is remembered, not entirely unfairly, as a war the birds won.